We welcome you back to the Patrick Netherton Show right here in 1130 The Tiger. Rogers and Patrick, that's us. We'd like to welcome in one of our favorites. I realized I was a whole job behind on her when I started putting the graphics together. From ESPN in New Orleans, Kat Terrell joins us. I still had you, matter of fact, your graphic still had The Athletic on it, so it was two times behind. But now you're in. How are you? What's going on?
Well, my friends also still think I work for The Athletic, so you're not alone. I like to confuse people with where I actually work.
Well, see, so I was like, oh, no, I know you left The Athletic. I was like, oh, yeah, Times-Picayune. And then I went and looked. I was like, no, wait, that's right. She went to ESPN. I was like, I've probably read 10 articles of yours through the course of the season on ESPN. I have no idea why I still thought you were with the Times-Picayune. So I appreciate you keeping everyone guessing anyway.
Oh, man, you're like – That was what, like 8 years ago?
I don't know.
I started Picayune in 2016. So that makes me feel old. Yeah. Not as old as a player telling me the other day when I mentioned landlines that he never had one.
Right.
So, yeah. I felt great about that.
Yeah. Our producer, Roger, still has a landline. No surprise.
Hey, some people do.
Well, I mean, we have a landline in here. We're talking to you on a landline. So,
they're very useful.
Now,
sometimes,
that being said, it's a landline that's connected voice over IP, so it's actually technically an internet line. It's not over an actual phone line. So I don't know if that changes anything or not. But yeah, I haven't had a landline I never had one at my house that I bought 13 years ago. So I never put one in. So I've at least been without a landline for that long.
I had one in 2012 because my parents insisted that I get one, and it was just spam calls. So I got rid of it.
Yeah,
so it's probably been about 10 years.
Yeah, you have to. You don't want it anymore. At this point, if you call 911, they can pinpoint your cell phone location anyway. So it's not like you need it for a 911 call. Hey, speaking of, you mentioned that. What's it like dealing with getting older while the team stays the same age? The old Matthew McConaughey, right? They get, I get older and they stay the same age. The players keep coming in and they're younger and younger as they keep going. Is it interesting relating to them or trying to relate to them now as opposed to, say, a decade ago?
Well, first of all, I like the reference, even though I don't think half the locker room would get it.
Well, sure, of course not. No.
Yeah. It's weird, because when I started this job, the first time I ever went in an NFL locker room, I was 22 years old. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the youngest people in the locker room. Yeah, and then all of a sudden I turn around and the only people, I'm 33, it's the only people in the locker room older than me or near my age are Mario Davis, Cam Jordan, and Derek Carr, and Taysom. So it's weird because I don't feel like I've been covering the NFL that long, and like I look up and it's been a decade. I don't know how that happened, but it is different relating to the players now, for sure. It's not so different in our everyday conversations. It's just different because I find myself gravitating more towards the players that are my age. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because I've known some of them so long. I've covered Cam almost his entire career, right, other than when I was in Cincinnati. But it definitely is an odd feeling. I'm not eager for the day where I am older than the players in the locker room. That hasn't happened yet. So.
Well, I will tell you, for basically my whole life, I would believe that Drew Brees was older than me, and yet I'm 3 years older than he is. That's one of those deals where you don't believe that you see a starting quarterback and you're like, well, that guy, granted I'm 47, right? So I'm obviously a lot older than you are, but it is strange to see these guys that you look up to in a way. And you watch them and you go, well, he's a super mature guy and he's definitely older than I am. Like, no, you're actually older than him. And that doesn't feel good, especially now considering the fact that there's basically no one in the league that will be my age for the rest of my life. And that's not a good feeling. And then I work at Northwestern State, obviously, so we're getting kids in. It's like, yeah, I was born in 2003. I'm like, no, I was born in 2006. No, that's not okay. Like, I don't, I don't like it. I'll be honest with you. I don't like it. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. Funny story about that. Well, only funny to me. I mean, as most people who read my stuff know, I'm a total salary cap nerd. You know, I really live for this part of the year where we talk about the salary cap all the time. And so I was making a spreadsheet of all the players' salary cap hits and their ages and all of this. And I was thinking with a few of them, I was like, oh, their ages are easy to remember. And I realized it's because they were born in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, it was easy to add up. But I was like, oh, no, there's so many players that are born in 2000. It was very sobering. I think I had to walk away for a minute.
Yeah, it's one of those you kind of have to go take a lap, right? You just have to go take a lap. Like just, you know, it reminds me I got to take my Metamucil, you know, when I'm getting ready for bed. It's it's sobering. Like I drive Uber on the side here, you know, here and there when I kind of feel like it, and I had a couple that seemed to be reasonably my age, and the guy was like, "Oh, you went to Caddo Magnet High School?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I graduated in 2005. Were we close?" And I'm like, "No, I graduated in 95." Like, I got people even people I think are my same age are 10 years younger than me. I'm not okay. I'm just not okay, Catherine. I'm just.
Oh, and I forgot about Jimmy Graham. He's older than me.
Oh, there you go.
But that also makes me feel old because I covered Jimmy Graham when he was at the height of his career. So that's weird, you know. Like I covered this guy when he was breaking goalposts and scoring 1 million touchdowns, and then we're witnessing the end of his career. It's odd. It's kind of cool in a way. Like you get to watch some of these guys from start to finish, but it's weird. It's unsettling, but that's life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was covering him when he was playing basketball, so
I
mean, that's
it's crazy.
I know. All right, well, I guess we need to just take some a multivitamin at this point, and buck it up. Speaking of Jimmy Graham, is he done?
Look, he is sure acting like he's done. He was posting some things on his Instagram. He flies his own plane, as everyone knows, and so clearly he was flying back to his off-season home. I don't know if that's Miami or somewhere else. And, he posted something like, thank you, New Orleans. It was the second time he's posted that. And someone on Twitter said, if this is the end, thank you, Jimmy Graham, for everything. And he just retweeted it and posted the salute emoji, which to me makes me think that is the end and he's done. And we're not going to know until he comes right out and says it. But it wouldn't surprise me. Jimmy has evolved a lot over the years. He's actually he doesn't talk to us a lot. Quite a fascinating human being. He has so many outside interests other than football. He bikes all the time, and he wants to enter a 500-mile race, and he has his airplane. And when he got the call from the Saints, he was in Italy just hanging out. And it just makes me think that he's kind of saying, hey, there's more to life at this point. And so football's not his whole life anymore. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's okay with this being the end. But, we'll see.
Not to get crazy esoteric, but something you mentioned, him retweeting it with the salute emoji. And it got me to thinking, you do realize that we're basically becoming the Egyptians again, right? That we're all speaking in hieroglyphs. Yes.
Yeah.
We all speak in hieroglyphs now. I don't know. I have a lot of weird.
The message is pretty clear.
Yeah.
You didn't have to say it.
Exactly. But like 1,000 years from now, will people understand what that even means? Right?
Well, I don't think Twitter will be around 1,000 years.
Well, I know,
from
but
now,
I'm just saying, is somebody going to go back and unearth Jimmy Graham's tweet, and they're like, well, I don't know what that. I guess it means he's touching his brow, which I don't know. Anyway, I have a lot of weird thoughts that cascade around my brain. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, so let's talk about the season as a whole. I have been very much on this was a disappointing season train. For the expectations, the amount of money that you paid Derek Carr coming in, the fact that you had Michael Thomas coming back, healthy seemingly. You had a bunch of weapons offensively. The line was a little bit of a concern. Felt like the defense would be okay, and you go 9-8, which is by far Dennis Allen's best record as a head coach, but it feels like it's a disappointing 9-8. What's kind of the feeling around New Orleans?
Oh, I would think if you just looked at people's responses to the season, you would have thought they won 6 games. It was a very disappointing 9-win season. They had the second easiest schedule in the league. I mean, there's games that they absolutely should have won, or they had the chance to win and just couldn't take advantage of it. I can think of 3 right now: the Green Bay game, the Houston game, the Jaguars game. Green Bay had a ton of injuries that day. In Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence was on one leg basically. So those are the 3 that stand out that they should have won. They were on Jacksonville's 8-yard line, couldn't score. They were on Houston's 24-yard line and threw 4 straight incompletions. And so when you look at it like that, I mean, yeah, it's disappointing because where do they go from here? Demario Davis is now he'll be a year older. Cam Jordan will be a year older. Michael Thomas might not be on the team. There's not a lot of optimism at the moment unless they just go to the draft and absolutely have an outstanding draft. And, we're not going to know that for a while. So I'm rambling, but, it's definitely a tough one, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And again, Rodgers, who's much more of an optimist than I am about this, has always said, look, there are – half the teams in the league are basically in the same position that the Saints are. We went through, and I think exactly half the teams in the league all finished at least 2 games above or 2 games below 500. Might have been 3. The league is a parity league. It's what they want, and so everybody feels like they have a chance every single week. But to have the investment that was made to come away with the results that they did, even winning games down the stretch, 3 or 4, 4 or 5, whatever it was. Even looking like a competent football, to me that makes it worse, because if they had really struggled down the stretch and had gone, 7 and 10, you go, okay, well, it was just a bad season, a lost season, or whatever. But the fact that they won games down the stretch and they looked like the team that should have gone 12-5 on the season, that made it worse for me to watch down the stretch. And then to not make the playoffs, to not have everything fall the way they wanted to. I would rather you have had a bad season. Let's either get rid of Dennis Allen or Pete Carmichael, or, let's kind of rip the Band-Aid off and start fresh and let's start healing. But I don't know if the end of that season was sort of fool's gold, right? That concerns me a lot going into this season.
Yeah, I would say there's probably 2 ways of thinking. When you look at the Atlanta, Tampa, and New England games, you look at a team that is fully capable of playing that way. You saw what they can do when they actually clicked, when they were great on defense, when their offense was clicking. So when you look at it that way, yeah, it's the feeling of lost potential. But there is the other side where you saw any time they matched up with a team that is very good or significantly better than them, like a playoff team, they had no shot. They were never – I know they scored late, but they weren't going to beat the Lions. They were never really in it against the Rams. And those 2 teams are a step above them right now. So whenever they were playing those types of teams, they just looked like they were on a lower tier. So, it's what are they? Are they the team with this untapped potential that only came out a little bit, or were they simply just a step below all of the good teams in the league? I know obviously the Bucs are a playoff team, but for a minute so are the Saints and Falcons. So I don't know how to feel about that one.
Yeah, I don't either. Are you surprised that there were that Carmichael seems to? Too. Yeah, are you surprised that Carmichael seems to have kept his job and is still there, even with the rumors that Gruden is coming in?
I'm going to give that a few more days. I think if they think that they're just going to keep the same staff and add John Gruden and everyone's going to be happy, that's kind of insane thinking to me. They've got to make some changes. Maybe it probably won't happen until next week. I don't know either way what that means about Carmichael, whether he stays in that position, whether he moves to an analyst position, whether or he leaves and goes to Denver. I don't know yet, but I'm not ready to say that because they haven't done it yet. It means they haven't done anything. You know,
Okay.
The Falcons haven't even I don't think the Falcons have even met head coach requests yet. I might be wrong. That may have just happened, but you know, some of these teams take their time with this stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how it's all gone down. That being said, there are pieces in place in New Orleans, and there's a I think a really good football team there waiting to come out. We saw the potential of Derek Carr. He's just been so inconsistent. You still have good offensive weaponry. Assuming you can get anything out of Penning at some point on the offensive line. Brissy was a terrific draft pick. Peyton Turner, when he came back, had a sack, and maybe he can get over the injury bug. The defense is aging, but even when they lost their stars, their backups were in good place and seemed good. That defense played really well down the stretch. Again, granted, against some bad teams. Do you look at this and say, okay, this team is primed to take the next step? Or do you look at this as that was kind of the most you could expect to get out of this team, and maybe it won't be any better from here?
I mean, I picked this team to win 10 games this season, beginning of the season, so I wasn't too far off. But I don't feel that way right now about the upcoming season. You know, free agency can change things, the draft can change things. But right now, I'm not going to be the optimist here. When I look at this team, you know, I see their defensive leaders are getting old. Mm-hmm. DeMario can still play, but, often once a player gets old, it happens very quickly. You know, it's 1 year, they're very good. Next year, they just drop off and they never regain that previous form. So, I think that's a concern with Jordan, with DeMario, with Tyrann Mathieu. I don't think they've gotten much out of Marcus May. The Trevor Penning issue is highly concerning that they trust him so little. He can't even get on the field in the end of a blowout against Atlanta. I think there are some pieces that I would be very encouraged by. I think Chris Olave is very good. I think there's a lot to be encouraged by in Rashid Shaheed. I think, like you said, I think the secondary played well when they had to turn to their backups. And so that is encouraging. They had a lot of turnovers this year. That's encouraging. But right now, I would just be concerned, where are the waiting in the wings stars that are going to take this team to the next level? Because, they've struggled with mobile quarterbacks. They've struggled to stop the run. They did well against Atlanta. But I think, to me, that's either an aging issue or an athleticism issue. So how do you correct that? There's a lot they got to fix, and they have salary cap issues again. So, we'll see how much they're able to do in free agency. I know they always seem to make it work, but maybe I'm being a downer. I'm just cautious about how this team can take the next step at this point.
Right. It feels like the window's closing a good bit. And they did a lot to try to keep the window propped open, especially the Derek Carr deal. Finally, let's talk about you mentioned the end of the Atlanta game and the blowout. Benjamin Watson's on there saying you can't come back your coach can't come back from the players not obeying you, basically doing what they wanted to do, and then you go in and throw them under the bus for doing it. How do you read that whole end of the season, into the Atlanta game thing?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The team certainly banded together as players to say it was all a team decision. I think ultimately the decision does kind of fall on Jameis. He's the one with the ball. Jameis has had a few up and down years here. Last year he was publicly upset with Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen told him, we're going to sit you due to injury. You're not going to lose your job. And then he never got his job back. Mm-hmm. So, now as we're approaching this offseason, Jameis is quite possibly not going to be on the team next year. Not because of that, but because I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to explore his options. He does want to start somewhere or attempt to start. So, maybe that was part of it. I think a large part of it is, they really did want to get Jamal a touchdown, and they really wanted to get Jimmy Graham a touchdown, which didn't happen. So I definitely think it's a bad look on Allen's part, but I don't necessarily think it means like some sort of team mutiny. But it's one of a larger issue. I think that's something to watch going forward. Just looking at all the things that have happened over in this locker room publicly over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's just such a weird dynamic, and I don't know.
It's weird.
It's just everything's odd. Jameis is already kind of an odd duck to start with. My major issue I had with that last play was that they did it out of the victory formation, right? They were tricking Atlanta into giving Jamal Williams that, and I have no problem with them wanting Jamal Williams to score, and he seems to be a consummate teammate. I know he's a great personality. We've seen a lot of that. I just didn't like that they did it out of victory formation. Don't trick anybody. If you want to try to get the touchdown, man up, get out in the I formation or whatever, and give Atlanta a chance to stop you. That's the only part I didn't like. I don't really care about the whole politics of the locker room and stuff. That stuff doesn't bother me.
Yeah, some players feel the same way. There are players who didn't love that they did it out of victory formation. So not every player was. I'm not going to say they weren't on board with it. I think they were on board with getting their teammate a touchdown. I think every player was genuinely happy that he got a touchdown. Talking to players in the locker room that night, some of them had reservations about doing it out of victory formation. I think they would have rather just lined it up. So basically what I heard happen is that some of the Atlanta linemen were saying, wait, y'all are kneeling it, right? And they just didn't answer.
Oh, man.
So it's possible that the Falcons picked up on that. Clearly the players weren't that upset about it. You didn't see any – and this is a very heated rivalry, and the players, they weren't fighting. There was no pushing, anger, shoving, anything. It was like the Falcons just kind of accepted it. I guess you can read into what that means.
Yeah, I think they all saw the writing on the wall. The only guy who was mad about it was the guy who's no longer with the organization anymore. That was interesting to say the least. Yeah, I just didn't like it out of victory. Also, not for nothing, but you might end up costing some offensive linemen next year when you line up in a victory formation to kneel on it at the end of the game. Somebody's going to go Greg Schiano on you. And try to blow up your offensive line when you go to kneel because, we saw you run it out of victory formation. We don't know that you're kneeling. We're going to go blow your quarterback up in the backfield. So that's something I worry about as well.
Yeah, actually Peyton Turner did joke about that. He was saying, I guess we need to, we'll have to be ready for or he said something like, I guess I'll have to play out victory formation or something. Like just as a joke, but
they're going to come after him.
Maybe. These teams turn over so much.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. But it definitely is not how I expected that game to end. I think it's just one more weird story in this weird rivalry, which makes it always fun to cover.
Yeah.
It's always my favorite game to cover. I love how petty these teams are towards one another. I love that Cam Jordan didn't care.
No, the whole thing with, and I love the fact that Matt Ryan had to sit there and watch it.
Yeah, it's a fun rivalry.
Yeah.
But the Bengals-Steelers game was always fun to cover too. But it was a different type of rivalry.
Yeah. By the way, you need to remind all of your Bengals people that Houday is not a chant. That Houdat is a chant. Houday, none of that makes any sense. So just need to remind them that.
I'll get right on that.
Make sure you tell all your Cincinnati people. Kat, you're the best. Thank you so much for spending a little extra time with us and kind of wrapping things up. Obviously, we'll be back with you when we get closer to the season, free agency, the draft, all of that stuff. We'll kind of see what this team looks like going forward. I know you don't really have an off season, but have as good an off season as you can.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Kat Terrell from ESPN in New Orleans.